Hello, and welcome to another edition of ScholaLatinae, where today we'll be talking about the linguae antiquae, the ancient languages that are more than just Latin. When we think of ancient languages, we tend to focus on Latin and Greek, but in reality, ancient Europe had a multitude of different languages spoken by the various separated peoples that lived there. So in Western Europe, this could be Punic, as seen with Carthage, Celtic and Gothic in Germany and Gaul, and even Italic, other Italian languages that flourished alongside Latin. In the Near East, there's Anatolian, Luwian, cuneiform, and even hieroglyphs, as seen in Egypt. And there are also other languages, such as the Tyrsenian languages like Etruscan, and Minoan languages like Linear A and Linear B. Today we'll be discussing a few of these and a few interesting case studies. But I want to preface this video by saying that this is in no way comprehensive and that there are entire fields of study dedicated just to these separate languages. So if you want to learn more, I encourage you to go and do your own research. So first, let's discuss the mystery of ancient Troy. So ancient Troy gained its fame from, of course, the Iliad and the Odyssey, Homer's epics about the Trojan War, where the Achaeans, led by Agamemnon and Menelaus, tried to retrieve Helen from Hector, Priam, and Paris, the Trojans. So Troy is actually a real site, as you can see on the map here, and there are actually 9 Troys in archaeology that are stacked on top of one each of another, showing the successive layers of settlement in the area. So what is so mysterious about this? Well, we don't know what languages these Trojans spoke. Of course, in the later Troys, in the sites that flourished in the Roman and the Greek periods, they would have spoke things like Latin. But before that, even older than when the Romans and the Greeks came in, we don't have many inscriptions. And thus, there is a kind of mystery here for what language the Trojans spoke. It could be Ludwian, which is this an Anatolian language that has been spoken in the area, and I think we have some limited inscriptions in it, but it could be any other Lydian languages or even an Etruscan predecessor, and we will discuss Etruscan later, which is quite a mysterious language on its own. But as you can see, the languages of the ancient world aren't definite. There are mysteries, and this is captivating. Next, we have Punic, which is the language of Carthage, the famous city from Rome's famous Punic Wars, where Scipio Africanus fought, where Scipio Aemilianus fought, where Cato the Elder argued about. And Carthage in this ancient time was quite an important city as a trade route. It was a Phoenician city with great connections to Phoenicia and Tyre, and thus it had a Semitic Phoenician-influenced language. And our kind of only remaining literature that utilizes Punic is the Latin author Plautus's Poenulus play. But we know that even though it doesn't survive, there was a corpus of Punic literature back in the day. And some of this included fascinating works like Hanno the Navigator's Periplus, which documented his travels around the coast of Africa, which is quite fascinating if you want to research it on your own. But Punic also quite influences the languages that the Greeks spoke, that the Romans spoke, and even languages now. So I have some examples here. So the word Africa, which we use to denote the continent today, could have come from the Punic afar, meaning dust. Or the word gorilla could have come from the Greek gorilai, which could have come from Hanno the Navigator's work. Or Quintilian once mentions that the word mappa, which means napkin or the cloth used to start races at the circus, specifically chariot races, could have derived from Punic. And according to the Historia Augusta, which of course its credibility is questionable, the word Caesar itself comes from a Punic word that kind of denotes an elephant. So of course, Punic has had a great linguistic influence on other languages. And this is something that we see throughout the ancient Mediterranean, where languages all influence each other and no language is set apart. So now I want to for us to ancient Italy, where we had Italic languages, which think of it as Latin adjacent. So the Latin language was originally spoken by the Latin peoples, which is the area around Rome. But In other areas, such as in the south and in the north, other languages were spoken like Oscan and Umbrian in the south, specifically in Campania and Sam, and where the Samnites lived. There's Faliscan, South Pisane, and Venetic. So Italy was quite varied in its languages back in the day. And of course, we have this famous quote from Aulus Gellius describing Quintus Ennius, who was one of the founders of Latin literature, with his epic Annales. And what Aulus Gellius says is that Quintus said he had three hearts because he could speak Latin, Greek, and Oscan. So, of course, back in the ancient world, these languages were quite important. And we have coins denoting them, especially from the Italian social war in the 90s BC, where we see these different city-states which are trying to find their independence from Rome, minting their own coins as a symbol of their independence from Rome. But these languages kind of gradually died out to Latin dominance. We do have some inscriptions from the 1st century AD, and they were in the vernacular. And our remaining inscriptions from this 1st century AD are from, of course, Pompeii. So that's how we know they survived that long. But after that, they disappear, probably due to the Latin and the Roman influence in the area. But one of the languages that is located in Italy, but is not kind of the part of the Italic language family, is Etruscan. So we have thousands and thousands of inscriptions in Etruscan, and Etruscan was a language used by the Etruscan people who lived kind of to the north of Rome. It is what we would call Tuscany now, and Etruscan is an isolate, or it's Tyrcenian, which means that we don't really know where it came from. It doesn't look similar to the other languages. It could possibly be Tyrcenian, which means it's related to kind of Rhitic and languages that we found on Lemnos. And it's kind of a mystery. It's not completely unknown because we do know how to translate some inscriptions from it, from context, from linguistic research, from things like that. So we have known words. We can translate some of it, but for a large part, the greater grammatical sequences of Etruscan and the greater structure of it still hasn't been discovered. And this is really interesting because the Etruscans hugely influenced the Roman people in their art, in their culture. We see things like gladiator games coming from this area and their funerary practices. And of course, linguistically, the influence was also great, with key Latin words like populus, meaning people, and vultur, meaning vulture, all coming from Etruscan. And of course, we have English words that come from this too, like populus and the English bird vulture, of course. So Etruscan, for a language that has influenced Latin and even English so much, is a mystery, and that's fascinating. And of course, we have the influences on Latin from the actual other Italic languages. So I'm going to focus on some influences from Oscan and Umbrian because those are the Italic languages that we do know the best. So we have things like the intervocalic F. That's an F in between vowels. So like the word Rufus probably came from Etruscan, I mean, not Etruscan, Oscan or Umbrian. We have names like Manius, which clearly came from Oscan influence. There was a genre back in the day called Atellan farce, which is the commedia dell'arte of Italy today. And Atellan farce was presented in Oscan and Umbrian, and we know this because we have authors like Cicero describing it as such. We also see words like bos, meaning cow, coming from the Italic, and in Italic it was actually wus, because in Italic languages the V kind of turned to a B. And we also see key vocabulary, like the word Italia in Latin, which is, of course, where we get the English word Italy, came from the Oscan Viteliu, which meant land of the bulls, probably because of some bulls that lived in the area and were described in the Oscan language. So, of course, you see here that the influence of these Italic languages on Latin was great and not negligible. And this is fascinating, kind of to see how Latin and Greek and these other languages that we do study so much have been influenced by these other languages that have been less studied. If you want more info on Oscan specifically, there's this website that I've put up, oscanodes.com, if you want to check it out. It has some resources if you want to delve deeper into the Oscan language and into the Oscan civilization. So if you want to visit that, thank you. And thank you for staying with me through this video. I think that these languages are a fascinating topic and deserve more research to see how our modern linguistic world came into view.